Okay. Hello everyone. Just want to welcome Christina. We've known each other for a while.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you being here and giving us the presentation. And maybe tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Yeah,
and
sure.
That's always exciting.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Christina Raya. I am a filmmaker. I've crowdfunded 4 times for 2 features and 3 shorts. And I got started on Kickstarter in 2011, just crowdfunding for my own work. And I realized that it could be a way to really have a career, particularly if you're someone who sort of doesn't have access to the industry, and obviously the industry has a lot of biases. There are a lot of doors closed to people. Like, you know, as a woman and a minority, I felt like there wasn't a way for me to get my content made without having someone as a connection to the industry or having just like a rich uncle who could write me a check. And so crowdfunding became a way for me to do that. I started speaking on panels about how I have been able to build an audience for my career and to sort of make the content that I want to make. And then I met Emily Best in 2013, the CEO of Seed&Spark, which had just started. And it was a platform by filmmakers for filmmakers. And she really convinced me to switch platforms for my 3rd campaign. And I really loved it. I loved sort of all the things it has to offer, which I will talk about. And so I became an advocate for the company, and then in 2016, when they were expanding, they offered me a job. And so now I'm the director of crowdfunding at Seed&Spark. I help filmmakers launch campaigns. If you were to submit, I would be one of 2 people who would be giving you feedback on all of your materials and helping you go live. And I also teach this class at film festivals across the country. So I'm going to talk about Seed&Spark a bit at the beginning to sort of break down how we're different. That said, you know, everything I'm talking about is crowdfunding sort of general. It could be applied to any platform. You don't have to use Seed&Spark, though I hope you would want to after the class. But yeah, it can be applied to anything. It is film focused because we are a film focused platform. Now I'm a filmmaker, and I assume everyone here is a filmmaker. But you could also apply most of the principles to sort of any kind of artistic endeavor. And ultimately, it's more about audience building and not so much exclusive to crowdfunding. It's about all the things that you would be doing, like even outside of a crowdfunding campaign, building up to a crowdfunding campaign, after you run a crowdfunding campaign. It's about sort of maintaining a connection with an audience online and through sort of a variety of marketing strategies. It will be a lot of information. You are welcome to take notes, but I'd rather you just sort of ask me questions. I have these sheets that's from one of our sponsors. If you're open to filling them out, you don't have to fill out any of it. Even you could if you'd like to, but at least if you give me your email address at the top, I can send you this deck. And the email that we send out that includes the deck also has like discounts for some stuff from our partners. So let's jump in. Okay, so as I said, Seed&Spark is a platform by filmmakers for filmmakers. Unlike most platforms, we're not only interested in helping you raise funds for one project. We're trying to fix what we think is broken in independent film, and it's that there are sort of all these middlemen that exist between you and the end product and you and your audience. And so you sort of have no data transparency, and you have no way, you often give up the rights to your work, and you have no way of sort of carrying over one project's success into the next one, into getting the next thing made. And so we've built a platform that is sort of devoted to true independence. A lot of being an independent filmmaker, a lot of our training is about waiting to be picked. It's like sitting to festivals and hoping to get in, hoping to get the right meetings with investors, if you can like sort of figure out that way to getting to those people that have that money, and then it's like getting in that room and then it's convincing them to invest in your project. It's like hoping to be the one person that gets that one grant every year. It's a lot of waiting. And we believe that the true way to, you know, be an independent artist is not feeling like you're competing with your peers, but that there's sort of a pocket of audience members for every single one of us, and it's about identifying them and engaging them and turning them into your resources to make content. Because fundamentally, there are people who want to watch what you want to make, and so it's just about finding them and talking to them and getting them on board. So, as I said, it is largely about having direct connection and also having data, being able to interpret, you know, who the people are that are watching your content and engaging with your content and how you can carry them over. And that's sort of what we're going to talk about and also what our platform is built for. Okay, but just to say, like, I'm not going to talk about the platform as a whole too much, but we are also a streaming platform because we are trying to be like a one-stop hub for you to have true independence. So you could crowdfund with us, and that's it. You could release the film however you want, you know, get a distribution deal, whatever you'd like to do, or you could submit your film or web series or whatever it may be for review to our acquisitions team and stream with us, which is non-exclusive and doesn't take any rights from you and has the highest payouts, currently 18 cents per minute watched. So the more people watch your content, the more you make. Or ideally you'd be doing both. You'd sort of be coming full circle. So you crowdfund with us, and then you eventually, after like a festival run or whatever it is you choose to do with it, you release it on our streaming platform. So the audience that you've built on the crowdfunding side gets carried over to the streaming side. And so you could kind of use our platform in either of those ways, all combined. Crowdfunding does not guarantee that you will be streaming with us. We do have certain like qualifications and quality standards. However, it gets you at the top of the list for review if you've crowdfunded with us. And if you are interested in being an audience member, it is currently $6.99 per month to get unlimited access to our series and films, which are around 250 titles. But we're starting to talk about, and we'll be releasing by the end of the summer, a kind of pay what you wish model that sort of like tacks onto streaming services you're already subscribed to make it sort of like friendlier for people who are probably subscribed to like every streaming service that exists out there already. And that is, as I said, like what differentiates us is that the more you watch, the more you're supporting artists because they're making money off of your views. Unlike most streaming platforms where it's just like they're getting what they get and that's that. Okay, and then quickly, something that differentiates us from other platforms and something you should definitely look out for if you're planning to make either a series or a feature. We do crowdfunding rallies every year with influencers because we understand that while, you know, we believe in not waiting to be picked, filmmakers also want to sort of have an opportunity to like bridge that gap and get in, and so we partner with bigger entities like the Duplass brothers. We did this last year and we're doing it again in the fall. It's called the Hometown Heroes Rally. It's for narrative or documentary features shot in a filmmaker's hometown. And filmmakers essentially run a campaign as they normally would, but it's all sort of during the same window of time around some sort of theme. In this case, it's around your hometown. And the Duplass brothers will pick up to 5 filmmakers to give $50,000 to and come on board as executive producers. Before that, this call for submissions is currently going on, and it ends, I believe, I want to say August 18th. It's somewhere around there, and that is with Color Farm Media and Black and Sexy TV. That is for pilots or series by creators of color. There has to be someone above the line that identifies as a person of color. It doesn't have to be exclusively filmmakers of color, but that is for $25,000. Mentorship from Color Farm Media, which I don't know if you know the show Living Single, but Erica Alexander is the founder of Color Farm Media. She's awesome. I'm a big fan of her, and I've also just been getting to spend a lot of time with her. And she would come on board as a mentor, and Black and Sexy TV is specifically looking for content by Black artists that they could essentially greenlight into a series that they would fund. And so those are things that you maybe want to look into on our site if you have either a feature or a series that qualifies. And then just to quickly like run down some key differences because they'll come up throughout the class. Seed&Spark is not flexible or all or nothing. We're sort of in the middle. You have to get to 80% of your goal in order to get your funds, because we believe that any truly resourceful filmmaker can make the film that they promised on 80% of their goal, but anything less than that is sort of sacrificing something you promised. And this is all about sort of being able to build trust with an audience and carry them with you and have accountability. So you want to make sure you deliver on what you promise. We have something called our wish list, which is essentially like a wedding registry, and it allows you to itemize all of your expenses, and that gives a few different things. It allows people to see exactly where their money is going and even choose where they put their money. So like metaphorically, they can say like, I want my $25 to go towards the actor's pay because I'm friends with the actors. So it sort of builds this like level of personalization. It also allows them to make loans. So like if you need a specific camera and someone local has that camera, they can offer to loan it towards the campaign, and you would agree like, okay, I need it on these dates, and if they confirm that they can offer it to you on those dates, you approve it, you set the value of what would have been the rental cost, and then that value goes towards your overall goal. And so like people can donate food, they can loan locations, they can loan gear. I loan out my gear often to people through the campaign. So it's a way to get community support. That's unique to our platform. And then a big one is that we partner with a ton of other organizations that are focused on film and helping filmmakers. And if you hit certain milestones in a successful campaign, you get free stuff like festival waivers. You get about like 25 different festival waivers. You get like post-production services or discounts. If you get to 1,000 followers, which are free users, people who just follow your campaign for free, you get a 1 terabyte hard drive from G Technology and $1,000 towards Teradek Creative Solutions. And so like we're really trying to incentivize filmmakers to build an audience, not just focus on the funds. And that's why we give you stuff if you build followers, which are just people who sign up and follow for free. And so as I said, like we're really trying to support the community and really get filmmakers to think about their career as a whole. And a big part of that is thinking about you know, who is your audience? And that's what this whole class is really devoted to, is like figuring out who your audience is and identifying them and talking to them. But a mistake that most filmmakers make is thinking that they can just like put a campaign up and people will discover it and they'll be successful. But there is no if you build it, they will come. You need the crowd before you can fund. You will absolutely discover much of your crowd through a campaign, but you need a foundation of people that will sort of become your amplifiers to reach beyond your existing network. And that could be, and probably will be, partially your friends and family, which is, especially if it's your first crowdfunding campaign, that's probably the bulk of your foundation that will get you started. However, there's crossover, like your friends and family may genuinely want to watch the thing you are wanting to make, not just because of you, but because they like that kind of content. But generally speaking, it's not sustainable to just be like funding through your friends and family. I've run 4 campaigns. My first campaign was like totally most of my friends and family. My last campaign definitely had some people that have supported me again and again, but it was majority sort of the network that I've built through the content that I put out and the people who enjoy watching my content or who have like enjoyed being collaborators of that kind of content. But generally speaking, it's my crowd, it's not my friends. And so this is sort of the classes I'm trying to break the habit of friend funding, which is what I think most people do and don't realize that they can break out of. So if there's anything you remember from this class, remember that email addresses are just everything. They're really important. I'm going to talk about social media in a second. Social media is very sort of key to building momentum and maintaining momentum through a campaign, but email addresses are where it's at, because it's your ability to sort of go into someone's inbox and say, hey, you care about this kind of stuff, that relates to my project, here's why you should support it. There's nothing you can say on social media out to the world that will appeal to everyone on a personalized level. So it's really about that one-to-one connection. Okay, so social media is important though, because it's your ability to reach out into the world. So these are concentric circles. The outer circle is everyone that you don't know, that's most people in the world. And the next circle is your social media reach. Now, as I said, a lot of people use social media as like an announcement bar. They just say like, hey, check out my work, or I'm working on this thing, click this link. It's a lot of like calls to action, but it isn't personalized, and it isn't appealing to anyone in any kind of like very specific, passionate way. And ultimately, there are so many people in the world, there's so many things obviously going on in the world, and there's so much so many points of interest that the idea that you could say anything that would appeal to every single person that comes across your feed is just like unrealistic. And so you need to start thinking about how to use social media as a tool to building direct connections with people. And so the main thing is you want to look for conversations that are already happening online and jump into those conversations. For instance, I do a lot of LGBTQ inclusive work, so I'm always on Twitter looking for people who are talking about LGBTQ rights and talking about the kind of content they watch. and what they're hoping for from that content. And I'm jumping into those conversations because I truly care about that issue and I care about that kind of representation, but I also am making that kind of content. And so I'm sort of creating this dialogue that will eventually turn into the ability to say, hey, you want these things out of content, I am making that, I'm offering that, join me. And so you want to really use social media as a way to find the people who care about the things you care about that relate to what you're making and create conversations. And then your metric for success is your ability to convert that person into essentially someone you have a direct connection to, whether it's the ability to DM them or to actually have their actual email address. But you should know that we only see a 1% conversion rate from social media shares to contributions to a campaign versus a 30% conversion rate from direct email outreach to contributions to a campaign. And so that's really your metric for success. It's not how many Twitter followers you have or how many Instagram followers you have, but how much you're able to convert those people into someone you have that direct connection to. I have over 3,000 Twitter followers, and I feel like, generally speaking, probably like 10 people like my tweet, every tweet that I put out. And so it's not really, that's not what's giving me a career. It's what maybe people are paying attention enough so that they're like, oh yeah, she's remaining active, she's working on stuff, she's like in my mind. So when she has an ask, I will recall her. But no one's like being sort of encouraged to take an action from my tweets alone. It's all about just creating that direct connection. Okay, so who is your audience? A lot of people want to say, well, a lot of people want to quote a demographic, but even before that, they want to just say everyone. Like, oh, my content is for everyone. And that's just not true. There's like some stuff maybe that is for everyone, but generally speaking, people are so diverse, people watch so much content, they feel like they're being fed probably like so many different ways and from so many different genres and types of content that generally speaking, what they choose to watch is very specific because there is so much to watch. And so they have to really want it. And there isn't something that every single person wants. And so you have to figure out who the people are that want the thing that you want to put out. And so if you quote a demographic, you're doing yourself a disservice because even that is so broad. These three women at the top are all between 24 and 35, but they have different careers, they have different hobbies, different social circles, they have very different lives, and they probably watch different content. And so, if you have like billions of dollars, the way that Hollywood movies do, you can do the kind of like military spray and pray method and hope that you hit the people that you want to reach. But ultimately, indie filmmakers, we don't have that kind of time, we don't have those resources, and we definitely don't have that kind of money. And so we have to be very, very, very specific about where we spend that kind of time and money and resources. So the way to do that, to figure out who your audience is to talk to people. So I would love actually for someone in this room to pitch what they're working on, just even like a log line. Anyone?
Right now?
Yeah.
I don't know, two strangers from foreign land meet each other in a hotel in Manhattan, and it's kind of a Thelma and Louise meets Lost in Translation.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. What is that format? Is that a feature?
It's a feature.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Who in this room would watch that? Could I ask you a few questions?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So before I get to my questions, the key here is to make sure that you get comfortable pitching your story around, and we're a room full of filmmakers, so the answers to my questions I'm going to ask you are very film focused. You want to ask non-filmmakers, because yes, we as filmmakers consume content, but you're trying to reach people who are probably not inundated with crowdfunding campaigns constantly, and that means non-artists. And so for instance, most of my social circle, other filmmakers. However, my husband does not work in film, so like I utilize any kind of office party to just like pitch at his coworkers. Like I'm really bad at small talk. I can only talk about like politics, and so I choose to like talk about something safe, and that is working on my pitch. Anytime I like go into like my local coffee shop and the barista is like, what are you doing up at 5 a.m. getting a box of coffee? I will tell them, like, oh, I'm a filmmaker, and like they're really fascinated by that and they want to know what I'm working on. I practice my pitch on them. But the point is to get comfortable doing that. And then the other thing is when someone says that they would watch that, if you ask them, like, would you watch this? Make sure they're telling you the truth. And so like I don't bother pitching to my mom because I know she'll watch anything I make. And so like she would skew my data because she's not my audience member because she cares about the thing. She's my audience member because she cares about me. So you want to really get honest answers. Okay, so where do you hang out online?
Twitter.
Okay.
Occasionally Instagram.
Okay. Where do you get your news?
Podcast, NPR podcast. Twitter occasionally.
Okay.
You mean news, like
yeah.
current events?
Yeah, current events, yeah. Okay. Are you like subscribing to NPR or?
Yeah, to a podcast.
Okay.
And I'm like that demographic that doesn't have regular TV anymore. I stream everything.
Great. That was one of my questions. Since you said that, what are you watching? What apps are you using?
Netflix, Hulu, and HBO Now are what we have.
Okay, and are you doing that through like a Roku or Apple TV on your TV?
Apple TV.
Okay. Do you still go to the theater, like movie theater?
Yeah.
Do you see independent films or more mainstream stuff?
Sorry, filmmakers, but I probably, when I go to the movies, it's more often to see, like, you know, Avengers Infinity War, but I try to support independent films as well.
Cool. Do you read any blogs or, like, check out any kind of more independent sort of websites?
Yes.
Anything, like, non-film focused?
Oh.
Like, because I assume you could list a ton of film blogs, but anything not film related? Anything?
In terms of blogs?
Yeah, or like websites you're interested in.
Yeah, that are not friends of mine.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's okay.
A lot of my friends' blogs. I'm sure I do. Yeah, like history is an interest of mine.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like non-artsy stuff, but
that's fine. Thank you. Do you belong to any organizations other than like NYWIFT?
Yes, I think. Off the top of my head, I can't think. But I do volunteer sometimes.
Okay, very cool. What kind of causes?
Like human rights campaign. The ACLU.
Cool. Thank you. And what kind of music do you like?
Probably a range. Like I'm not on the cutting edge of what's current.
That's fine.
So some like pop stuff, some old classic rock stuff.
Okay.
Do you want artist?
One artist, like any?
Yeah, that you listen to regularly.
That I listen. So classic rock, like Journey is always David Bowie. I will always turn up.
Thank you. And where do you spend your free time offline?
Offline, like with friends, my husband, hanging out.
Okay. Anywhere you
location?
go in particular?
Now you guys know so much about.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's right. I'm trying to think of a good. Like what kinds of things are you doing? Like
just sort of what is like a hobby, if you have any hobbies. Like I go to kickboxing, like that's something I would say.
Oh, I go to Pure Barre is my fitness thing.
Okay.
Or I like cooking.
Cool. Great, thank you so much. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
I appreciate it. Okay, so these are questions that help you get to know people on really individualized levels and help you find unique ways to reach people and speak to people, but also finding commonalities across your audience. So for instance, if you ask, a decent-sized polling of people and say, where do you hang out online? If most of them are telling you that they're almost exclusively on Twitter, then okay, during my crowdfunding campaign, I'm going to be really focused on Twitter. On the other hand, if you're seeing like more of a diverse grouping of answers, they're kind of using all platforms equally, then you say, okay, I need to have like a really robust social media marketing strategy during my campaign because they're sort of all over the place. If they tell you that they get their news by subscribing to specific sites or podcasts or blogs, then you definitely want to get people to subscribe to your newsletter before you launch a campaign. That will be really key in reaching people. However, if they're like, I get my news by seeing what my friends share and clicking through, then, which is sort of common, particularly on Facebook, if you have like a high volume of Facebook users in your audience, then you would say, okay, well, getting people to like agree to share the campaign will be huge in terms of reaching my audience because I have people that look to see what their friends are sharing. And so that like really helps you figure that out. And then also how people like to be spoken to. If most of your audience is saying, or even on an individual level, if one person says like, I get my news from the New York Times, and another person says, I get my news from BuzzFeed, there's nothing wrong with either answer, but the BuzzFeed person might respond more to a subject line that's like a listicle, like 5 reasons why you should support this campaign, as opposed to like a different kind of headline that would hook someone else who reads the New York Times. So like those are very unique things that will get you higher conversion rates. And then the music you listen to, like that's something that you never know how it could affect your campaign, whether it's like pursuing a partnership, which I'll talk about in a second, or just sort of getting ways to meet people, whether it's like getting out and going to like local people, like local open mic nights or like local artists that are performing, but also getting the rights potentially to music to use in your, not only the film, but actually the crowdfunding campaign. An example of this is a project that was on our platform called Res. It was a short film about a young man growing up on a reservation, and it was a coming-of-age story, totally unrelated to hip-hop music, but he found out through his audience questionnaires that a really big part of his local audience was very interested in hip-hop music and specifically an up-and-coming artist. And so he got the rights to one of that artist's up-and-coming songs to put in his pitch video, and the pitch video went viral. Now you can't plan for your pitch video to go viral, can't plan for anything to go viral, but you can do the homework that would like create the conditions for that to be possible. So that's an example. Other things like, cross-promoting with certain local artists that have a similar music genre that your audience is a fan of, so that you're reaching their audience because likely they will like the movie that you're making, especially if you're making like a music-oriented film, where people spend their free time is just a way to like get out and meet people. I mentioned that I do kickboxing, and so like everyone in my kickboxing classes, they all think I'm like a celebrity because they don't know any filmmakers, and it's really cute because they don't get that I'm not, but they are totally interested in everything I make because it's like unique to them that they know someone who makes movies. And I produced a short film called Armbar, and it was like about a young woman who fights MMA, and they were like totally on board to come to every screening of that, and so it's just like little points of interest that you can, I have yet to hit them up for a crowdfunding campaign, but I feel like that's a pool of people that is totally untapped and would probably support me. And you never really know, like there was a woman in one of my classes who pitched a film, and another woman who answered the questions as you did said that she doesn't do anything but garden. She like writes on gardening forums, and she reads gardening blogs, and she just is part of a gardening club, and that was her only activity in any capacity. And so I was like, well look, that's someone you would not reach unless you like got on some gardening forums or joined a gardening club, but she wants to support you. And so it's like those unique things, and you never know who's going to give you a ton of money. I'll talk about numbers in a second. The average contribution, generally speaking, is $25. That's the most common contribution, but I have had a total stranger give me $5,000 in a crowdfunding campaign. I've had strangers give me $1,000. I've had strangers give me $250. And so like while the most common is 25, sometimes 50 if you have a higher affluency in your audience. That said, you never know who that one person is that really matters, and so you want to treat everyone like they're that one person. And then, blogs and like independent websites, anything that is very specific, they tend to have a very involved audience because that audience is probably like reading everything they put out, they're probably subscribing, and so you want to have access to those sites and blogs. For instance, when I made my first feature, it was a horror film. I made it right out of college, and I had just been in a analytical horror film class, and so I reached out to all of those students in the class and asked them where they got their news about independent horror films. And through them, I found like 35 different sites and blogs I had never heard of, and I was able to reach out to those sites and blogs, and not in like a generic press release kind of way. I was able to say, hey, I know that your readers like this about your site, or this is what they come to expect from your site. Here's how what I'm making relates to that. Here's why your readers would care about what I'm making. And I was able to get a ton of press during that campaign, and that got me a lot of genre support, and like very specific genre support. And so I wasn't, I wasn't pandering, I wasn't like changing anything about my film, but I was changing slightly the way I talked about it, or at least like the thing I led with that was most interesting to that particular blog or site, because I knew what their readers wanted. And so that's like something that you would maybe only find out through your audience. And then how people watch stuff influences how they will eventually want to watch your content. And so as filmmakers, I think we are like, oh, you aren't really a filmmaker, or rather you haven't really made a film unless it's like screened in a theater setting. But it's like in reality, who still goes to the movies and watches independent films even? And so you can think about what your idea of end game is, like what you hope to do with your film. It's more about what your audience wants to do with your film, how they want to watch it, your film or series or whatever it is you're making. And so like, if you really want to do a theatrical release, but your audience is like, look, I'm going to watch your film on my phone, then like, you don't need to budget for a theatrical, you don't need to budget to shoot, in 4K or higher. You really, that influences the distribution strategy. On the other hand, like maybe you have an audience that skews older and they're absolutely still interested in seeing it in a theater, or like they are still, cable pay-per-view type people, so they do expect to see it in like a more traditional channel. So like you need to know what you need to budget for, and the only way to really know that is to talk to the people who want to see the thing you want to make. And so that's really the big thing here is like, you need to know who you're going to target. Before you can do anything that comes after, before you can run a campaign, you need to know who these people are that are going to contribute. And that means you have to really start figuring it out and talking to people. And while I find it's helpful to do it in person because you can read reactions easier, you can absolutely do it on social media too. When I was launching the campaign for my second feature, which was February of last year, I put my synopsis out on social media, and I was like, hey, respond if you would really watch this film. And then I got a ton of people who said that they would, and I asked them those questions on social media. So you can totally do this like on social media. It doesn't have to just be in person. But the thing about getting on social media is making sure that you, feel comfortable on the platform that you're on. Like if you find that your audience is mostly on Twitter, but you don't feel comfortable, like you're not very witty with words, or you're not comfortable being sort of like isolated to the amount of characters you have or whatever it may be, or you're just more visual and you want to be on Instagram, that's fine. Like be where you're comfortable, but then have someone who can represent the project on the platform that the audience is on. So it's sort of like finding a balance and not trying to be everywhere. I think worse than not having any social media accounts at all is having too many that are just dead. And so like pick one that you're definitely going to use and you'll do so comfortably and you feel like you can genuinely build an audience on, and start there. And then maybe work your way out. Okay, partnerships are really helpful in crowdfunding. A lot of people think that they're only for like cause-driven stuff, and I will say that it's easier to get partnerships for cause-driven stuff, but that doesn't have to necessarily be the case. As I said, if you're making like a film about music, then like local artists might be people that you partner with, or local businesses, restaurants, clothing brands, anything that is like, hey, you have an audience I want to reach, and I have an audience that you may want to reach, like let's cross-promote. The big thing about getting partnerships is making sure that you understand that they probably don't have a lot of time. So you can't reach out to them like 2 days before you're going to launch your campaign. You have to do so far in advance, and so you should probably already have done your audience messaging, testing, and knowing like, okay, this is who I'm targeting, this is how they like to be spoken to, here's some of like the language we'll be using during our campaign.
And you want to reach out and make sure that you do so far enough in advance that they can actually get approval, because if it's like an organization, like a nonprofit, they probably have to go through an approval process before they can really like agree to partner with you in any way. And then you want to make sure that you're really offering, not just asking. My like big thing about crowdfunding is that every ask should look like an offer. And so, you know, I'll talk more about that in a second. But in terms of this, you are offering the opportunity to cross-promote, essentially. And so it's like, hey, you have a mission and a message, and our film has that same mission and message. We can partner up and have a mutually beneficial relationship. One of my favorite examples is a filmmaker named Michael DiBiasio. I don't know if you know him, he's a local filmmaker. But he made a feature film called The Video Blogs, which was about a woman who was struggling with depression, and she started recording video blogs, and she made a connection with someone online. And the director, Michael, reached out to a ton of mental health organizations like months before the launch of his campaign and got them on board to be promotional partners. And so they were like sharing all over Twitter. I believe they put him in their newsletter. There was like a lot of promotion, and they had obviously like way more emails than he had alone through just his own network. And not only did they promote the campaign, but they also promoted the run of the film. So he did like a tour with his film. I think it was in 6 different cities. And after every screening, one of the organizations would do a talk back with the audience. And so he was like, hey, I'm going to screen my film that'll bring, you know, seats, people in the door. You'll have like a certain amount of seats filled, and then you'll get to have that audience to talk to you about your cause and your mission, and like even potentially collect donations from. And so that was like a perfectly mutually beneficial relationship that he formed that really helped his campaign. We put G Technology on here because they are a sponsor of this, the ability for us to offer this class, and they're our partner. And like the reason why we have them on board is because we started doing a tour in 2016 or 2015. Our CEO, Emily, and our head of education just like hit the road and started teaching this class at film festivals everywhere, and that was like totally self-funded. And then G-Tech, which makes hard drives, like really great hard drives, they saw like how many filmmakers we were reaching and how much like buzz we were getting behind it, and they were like, hey, we'll pay for your flights and come on board to help you reach more filmmakers if you will shout us out in your class. And like we were happy to do so because they do make really excellent hard drives, and like it totally benefited us. And so partnerships don't have to feel like skeevy. They don't have to be like, oh, you're selling out, if the mission aligns with your mission. And so like that's our example of how we've gotten partnerships on board. For my last campaign, I was like, I didn't reach out to the Trevor Project directly because I didn't really feel like our film perfectly aligned with what they were doing, because we didn't have any trans identifying characters in our film, but we did have just like queer inclusive characters in our film. And so we had said that like we personally would be making a donation of 5% of the money raised to the Trevor Project. And that was like something that we were saying just because we wanted to sort of support that organization, but also we wanted to like have that extra push to reach our specific audience that would care about LGBTQ content and issues. And towards the end of our campaign, they like started retweeting us because they saw like we were legit, and when we made the donation, like we shared a screenshot of it, and they retweeted that. We shared the screenshot of the donation that we made, and they retweeted that, and like that got us some followers for our campaign even after it ended. And so like that was like not an official partnership, but that was something that I did. And like moving forward, I will definitely be looking to do more partnering when it makes sense to do so. Okay, so speaking of offering, not asking, that same kind of tone should be translated to your audience. A misconception, I think, about crowdfunding, and probably a hang-up that filmmakers have, is that they feel like they're asking for a handout. I think that's why I'm very against the word donate, because I think that it's hard to say the word donate in our current times, and there are so many things to be donating to. And my reaction is always like, you should absolutely be donating to all of those things over there. I'm absolutely donating to all of those things too, but I don't want you to donate to me and my product. I want you to contribute towards the creation of something. I want you to join me in making it. And so the big thing is to remember that you are offering something. You're offering an end product that people will get to consume and enjoy, maybe have a copy of, and a unique experience to feeling like they have an inside look into the making of something, that they get to feel part of it, that they were in early, and that there's like limited time for anyone to buy into that. Once it's made, and no one can say that they helped make it after it's already been made. Only these people can. And so, if you see value in what you're doing, other people will see value. And so you really want to make sure that you have that tone through all of your crowdfunding. In my very first campaign, it was in 2011, crowdfunding had only been around for like a year, and no one was writing think pieces on the do's and don'ts of crowdfunding yet. And so I was sort of flying blind and just sort of like looking at other people and how they were succeeding or how they weren't succeeding. And I did have a successful campaign. All of my campaigns have been successful, but a lot of that success came from like learning from mistakes along the way and making adjustments. And in this particular case, if anyone has crowdfunded before, the first week, if you've done it right and you have sort of built momentum, it's great. You just like shoot up the first week, but then you kind of plateau. You hit a wall the second week, and it can be torture. And during my second week of my very first campaign, I started saying things on social media like, don't buy that cup of coffee this morning, give to my campaign instead. Or don't go out for drinks tonight, give to my campaign instead. And in theory, that like makes sense because they're going to spend money, so why don't they spend it over here? But it really didn't make sense because it sort of made me look desperate, which no one wants to jump on that bandwagon. And it shamed people for how they like to spend their money, which is like not what you want to do when you're asking people for money. And it made it seem like they had to sacrifice something in order to give to my campaign, which is not the tone at all that you want to set. And so, so I shifted gears. I was like, this is not working. So I started saying things like, join in making something, become part of something. I started talking about the why of the project, why it matters, and why people should want to be part of that. And that's how I had success. And so, 7 years later, I still see people sharing on social media their crowdfunding campaign saying, like, don't buy a $4 coffee, give me $4 instead. And I always send them messages, and I'm like, look, you're hurting yourself. Anyone who gives you $4 because of that post is doing it out of pity, not because they are excited. And they're probably not going to back you again. And so you really want to understand how your tone matters. And yes, there are totally people who won't get it, who may ignore you, who may not see it as an offer, but the vast majority of people will if you really set that tone and you contextualize the why around what the money is needed for, and that it's bigger than you, but all the people that will be working on it and the work that will go into it and the end product that will come out of it. But okay, social media is a big part of this because the thing is, on average, people have to see something 3 times before they take an action. And the thing is that you can probably, you should absolutely email someone first. That is really where the conversion happens. But some people may not respond right away, or it may just sort of get buried in their inbox. And social media is a great way to boost it up in their minds. They keep getting reminders because they see you sharing updates and you're sharing successes and how many dollars now you're away from your goal. And they're like, oh, I could be the person to get them there. And so engagement is really important. The thing is, you want to make sure that you are sort of hitting the golden ratio, which is actually for every 1 self-promotional post you want to do, you have to do 9 that are not self-promotional. But that doesn't have to be totally unrelated to what you're making. It should be sort of around the world of what you're building, and I think can be indirectly self-promotional. And so as I said, I do a lot of LGBTQ inclusive content, so when I'm not asking people to contribute or watch my work, I'm sharing news related to LGBTQ rights. I'm sharing other content that is similar in theme or tone or in representation to what I'm making, because I'm really a fan, and I think that people want to see your taste, and because I think that's if they see that you like something that they also like, that makes them want to see what you're making. But it also creates opportunities for cross promotion, where I'm sharing the work of other artists who then also may share my work. You're building the world. So you're not you're creating your voice and your vision as an artist, and you're owning it. And that, I think, is a great way to get people to be aware of your project without having to just share the project itself. And then altruism is really key. I think in order for us to have independent, sustainable careers, you individually, we all have to have independent sustainable careers, because like the industry and independent film cannot be sustainable without all of us like supporting each other and getting there together. And so, as I said, you definitely want to support other artists, not blindly, like you don't have to support every single artist. You should genuinely like the thing, and so if you are, that means something, because people are coming to you for a specific interest point, and so you are sort of like a hub for people to get what they like, whether it's your content or other content. And so you want to like think about that when you're branding yourself. And I know that can be uncomfortable for some people to think about branding, like you're a human being, but you also are a brand. And like it doesn't have to be, you know, all of who you are. You don't have to give away all of yourself, but you have to be comfortable kind of giving away enough of yourself that you'll reach the people that you're trying to reach. And so, you know, really being authentic to who you are is key. So for instance, when I first got on Twitter, I really just sort of wanted to be followed. And so I shared things like how-to articles on film and like news related to film. And it was like just all film stuff, but it was mostly safe stuff. Whereas like I'm a very opinionated person, I'm a very political person, I care about representation in the industry, I care about inequality, I care about politics. And so I started to get bored on Twitter, even though I was getting a following. So then I sort of shifted gears and I started sharing like more of my opinions and more of the things I care about. And yes, I started to lose some followers, but I started to gain like much more passionate followers who cared about what I had to say, and so then they cared about what I was making. And so you want to find that intersection and like embrace who you are. You can keep aspects of your life private, like you absolutely should, but be comfortable not just feeling like a non-stop promotion machine. You want to like have some vulnerability in there and show like who you are as a human being, because that's what people will latch onto. I make wildly different content. Like my first feature was a horror film. My second feature is like a family comedy. There are certain threads that are sort of what you'll see in all of my work, but generally like I don't stick to one genre. What is consistent is my voice as an artist, and I understand that people are following me. And that's because they feel like they know me, they want to support me, they've watched my journey as an artist, the things I've learned. I try to be pretty like candid about that stuff because I understand that that's how people feel connected, and that's what you're really trying to do. And so, you know, on my Instagram, like my husband doesn't really like to appear on social media very much, so he like makes occasional cameos, but like I'm not giving away my whole life in my relationship. But you'll see like my cats pretty constantly on my Instagram, because that's like an aspect of who I am and what I love as a person that sort of allows people to get an inside look without having to give away so much of myself. So that's like my example, but you really want to make sure that you're really hitting these beats here. And if you've never supported a crowdfunding campaign, like absolutely go home and support one. Because that's one of my pet peeves, is when someone asks me to support a campaign, their campaign, they've never contributed to one before. So like you want to be that person that's doing what you're saying and asking of other people. And honestly, that gets more support. I have been in situations where I'm crowdfunding and I share the campaign of other people that are crowdfunding, and the people that have already supported me are like, oh, that's really awesome, like I'm going to support that campaign, and I'm also going to double the pledge I've given to you because like you're cool. And I think that's great that you're like using your sort of like focus right now. People are like paying attention to you, and you're using it to benefit other people. And so you want to be that person, I think. And then don't be the person that disappears after a campaign. You want to, that's like a pet peeve too, is like you've asked and now you've gotten what you needed and now you disappear. So use things like Hootsuite that allows you to schedule tweets, that's free. Like find ways to be engaged even if you're not actually on your phone, like getting notifications constantly. Like when I'm going to be on set and I know I'm not going to be able to respond to things, I at least try to like program some tweets of like some of my work, some of my friends' work that I can just sort of regularly be having go out. So it seems like I'm engaged even if I'm not fully engaged. But that's really all, that is how you are able to come back, because people want to say like, okay, this person doesn't only come back when they're asking for something, they're always here and they're always engaging. Okay, so momentum. The inevitability of success. You want to make sure that people feel like they're jumping on board something that's going to succeed. We've seen that 90% of campaigns that succeed across all platforms hit 30% of their goal in the first week. And so getting to 30% is really, really important. I'm going to say for a second, I don't like to crap on other platforms, but I personally am against flexible funding. So like even if you don't use Seed&Spark, I don't think you should use a flexible campaign or platform, because it's hard to build momentum when people know that you'll get the money no matter what. I know that I personally have been burned before, where I've given someone $25, they only raised 10% of their goal, they took my money, but they never made the thing because they couldn't make the thing on 10% of their goal. And so like now, when people ask me to contribute to a flexible funding campaign, I want to support, but I won't get involved until they're at like 50%. And they could not be at 50% until like week 3. And so you want to make sure that people feel comfortable coming in on day 1. And that's why I think that like our 80% sort of threshold, or even an all or nothing campaign, gives you that kind of safety net for people that they feel comfortable doing so. All of that said, I have found that it's also helpful to do outreach before you launch a campaign, so that you know you're going to get to a certain percentage on day 1. I personally, when I was running my last campaign last February, I did outreach to try and like make sure that we would hit at least 10% on day 1, but also I'd been doing social media promotion. So it was like when we were 2 months away from the campaign, I did a countdown. When we were 1 month away, I did a countdown. And then when we were 3 weeks, and then 4 weeks, or rather 3 weeks and then 2 weeks, and then 6 days and then 5 days and then 4 days. And so it was like building hype and momentum and making it seem exciting, like something exciting was coming. And so that kind of tone really led to us hitting like 20% on day 1 from people who I had not even done outreach to, but because they had been like waiting for the exact date and time I had been hyping on social. And so you really want to like create the conditions of having that momentum. I think 30% seems to be the sweet spot where strangers feel comfortable getting involved, and that's where you want to get there as soon as possible. Because when strangers come across your campaign page, they don't want to see you like 15 days in and you're only sitting at 5%. They're not going to give to that. But if they see like, oh, you're at 40%, they're like, oh, this is going to make it. I want to be part of that. And so it's all about that kind of mindset and creating those conditions. Okay, so as for the goal, a lot of people think that there's a magic number that anyone can raise, and there really isn't. It's about how much you need and how much you can actually raise of that from your audience. And so I will say that a few things. You should treat your film production like you're starting a small business. You should have a full plan, a full budget for the entire life cycle of the film. So like know what your distribution plan is, or generally what you want to do with it. Do you want a distribution deal? What are those deliverables going to look like? Do you want to self-distribute? What is that promotion going to look like? Do you want to do a theatrical run? Do you want to do a festival run? How much is it going to cost to attend those festivals? All that stuff should sort of be built into your budget if possible. And then you want to look at that number and say like, okay, what can I actually raise? Odds are it's probably too much for one campaign, and our platform is actually built for you to raise in stages if you'd like, where you can launch a campaign for pre-production, come back a few months later, raise for production, come back a few months later, raise for post-production. We have seen people raise for one project like 6 stages. If you have like a goal like $250,000, something like that, you can absolutely do that. And the benefit of that on our platform is that you come back to the same campaign page every time, and you're just launching a new goal. So you keep the followers you've already raised from the last campaign. So anyone that like didn't contribute but has since followed you in that time, they get notified that they can now support you. Or anyone that did already contribute, they get notified that you've launched a new campaign. So it's like a great way to carry people over. The main thing about that is to make sure that you deliver on whatever you've promised in between stages, because if you're going to come back, people expect you to be where you said you'd be. So if you said, we're going to come back and raise for post, you should be at that stage when you come back. And you want to make sure that you've delivered, like whatever you promised people, whatever incentives you promised people, which we'll talk about in a second, you want to make sure you delivered so that you can turn those existing supporters into amplifiers for the next one, and even repeat supporters. I've had people who have supported me again and again, and that's because I deliver. But that said, let's talk about numbers for a second. The average raise for a film across all platforms is $10,000. On our platform, it is 15. That's because we sort of have like more prepared filmmakers who maybe are more ambitious. But it is still like, these are lower numbers. I think most people are like, oh, I've seen $1 million crowdfunding campaigns. So like, you know, it can't be that hard to raise $5,000. It can be really hard because it's like the people that are raising millions of dollars have millions of email addresses. Like those are usually celebrities. And so knowing the average numbers and knowing that, you know, we have an 80% success rate on Seed&Spark, and that's because of like this class and our feedback process. On Kickstarter, for instance, they have a 37% success rate. Most campaigns fail, and that's because it is a lot of work. And so, you know what is realistic. My general formula that I like to give people is this. Maybe you want to write it down, or if you have a video recording. But so on average, 30% of a team's full network will contribute. For your email list, let's say 30%, only 30% is going to contribute on average. The most common contribution is $25. And it takes getting to 30% of your goal in order to reach strangers and get them to contribute. So I say that you should take 30% of your email list, multiply it by $25, and that total number should equal at minimum 30% of your goal. If it does not equal that, then your goal is too high for where you're starting at. You should know that like you run one campaign, you probably quadruple your audience in that time, and so you are in a better position to then come back and raise funds through now that whole new group of people. But it sort of takes running that first campaign to get to that point. And so that's my formula, and it usually is very effective. You can maybe increase it to like $50, like 30% times $50 if you think that you have an audience that has like a higher income bracket than the average. And then it could go in the opposite direction. Like, are you a student filmmaker? Do you mostly know 20-year-olds? Then maybe you have to say like your average is 15. That's like, but generally you're pretty safe with 25. And that's the formula I always use when I'm launching a campaign, knowing that there are some like outliers that give me bigger amounts of money because like people that I've built through Twitter followings or whatever. But if this is your first campaign, that formula will really help you out. And as I said, you know, you could run like a $3,000 campaign for pre-production to like attach something or someone, and that will give you a bigger audience of people now that you can then plug them through for a bigger amount. I can tell you, like, I can do all this audience building, but nothing will like really build my audience like a campaign itself. There's just like something people get excited about, a ticking clock. They get excited about the like limited time to be part of something, and so like I always end up with a much bigger audience out of a campaign than when I went into it. So you know. But you do need that foundation to start with. Okay, so incentives. I mentioned incentives. They are a big component of crowdfunding. I'll be honest with you, people don't contribute for the incentives. They contribute because they're excited about the thing that you're making. That said, incentives are a great way to get people to go higher than maybe they would if it were like a one amount kind of situation. So a lot of platforms like to tell you that you should give swag type things like t-shirts and posters and mugs. I can tell you that most adults don't put posters on their walls. For some reason, people always want to offer posters, and I'm just like, do you put posters on your walls? Like, I put my own film posters on my walls in my office. That's really it. I don't put other people's posters on my walls. And so I generally think that incentives shouldn't cost you any money because odds are people don't want the stuff that you're thinking will cost you money. There may be exceptions, like if you're making, you know, a documentary about like bands from a certain decade and you're offering like t-shirts that have that band, like something like that that's like very, very fan-oriented, then maybe. But you would learn this information from your audience. When you're doing all those questions, like say, hey, what are the kind of stuff you care about? Like, do you collect posters? Do you collect t-shirts? Would you want a mug? Generally, I think they're going to say no. Also, I have offered t-shirts, like my very first campaign, I offered t-shirts, and I had to spend so much money to make them. It was so useless. But most people like didn't even want them, you know, and so they'll take them because you're offering them. Like when people offer me a t-shirt and I gave it that level, I'm like, well, I want it because you promised it to me, not because I really want it, you know? And so like, don't even give it, don't even make it an option. That's my motto, don't make it an option. But you do want to have things that will incentivize people to give at higher levels. And so I always say I always recommend to utilize things that you're already doing. Things that you're doing for your EPK, things that have to do with production, things that don't cost you any money. People that don't work in film think that being on set is really glamorous and cool and exciting. We know it's a lot of like waiting around on lighting and watching the same thing over and over again, but they don't know that. And so like allowing people to visit set, getting to eat a meal with the cast and crew, getting to like, maybe they get to even like yell action at some point, they get to yell cut, like getting to do things that are happening anyway, that's value. If you create value out of it, people will pay for it. For instance, when I'm not crowdfunding and I'm shooting, you know, a scene in a restaurant, I'm like begging people to come be extras in that scene. When I'm crowdfunding, you have to give $50 to be an extra. And so it's like, I've created value, I've created exclusivity around this thing, so now it's worth that price that I've set. So that stuff is like all things that you can utilize at higher levels. Obviously you can't have like hundreds of people coming to visit you on set, and you may end up with hundreds of people giving you money, and so you don't want to use this stuff at the average levels, which I'll talk about in a second, but this is good for like, you know, $50 or more, $100 or more, anything like that. Wrap party, you know, invites, premiere party invites, stuff like that. And then at the lower levels, the most common contribution being $25, I don't think it should cost you anything except maybe time. And it should inadvertently market the campaign because you are going to be getting hundreds of people giving at that level, and so you want to make sure that you are reaching their networks. And the best way to do that is to thank them on social media. People don't want to go on social media and say like, I'm so great, I just did this thing. They want you to go online and say, this person's so great, they just did this thing. They want you to tag them, they want you to brag about them. And the best way to like catch their audience, their network's attention is to be visual and personalized and shareable in that thank you. And so we recommend that you find creative ways to offer people something that is essentially just a shout out. Our favorite example of this is this photo here. It's hard to see, but it's a photo of me and Amelia Earhart. It is from a filmmaker named Sean Mannion, who is a friend of mine. He was making a film called Time Signature. It was about a woman who was going to the concert of her favorite band and found out that the drummer traveled back in time to tell her something. And so his catchphrase was, if you could go anywhere in time, where would you go? And at the $25 level, he was offering to Photoshop you into a time period of your choosing. Mm-hmm. And I did not give him money. I loaned him my lighting kit, which was like $250 value and didn't cost me anything. And he asked me where I wanted to go, and I told him to surprise me. And I'm not like a huge Amelia Earhart fan, but he knew that I would want to meet a woman in history. And so like he shared with this photo, and of course I shared it because it looks so fun and cool. And what was great about this is that it tied in perfectly to the theme of what he was making. It utilized a skill that he happened to be very good and very fast with. And it was just like fun and funny and got people's attention. The photos that he was putting out were just really funny. Like, one of our mutual friends said she wanted to go to the moon, and so we took a photo of her like riding a camel in the desert and put it on the moon. There's just a lot of really fun photos, and people were refreshing the campaign page, waiting to see the next one that would go out. And people were giving him $25 just to get their own photo. They didn't even care about the project. And so it was like a brilliant marketing strategy. We have seen people try to recreate this, and it's like, if it doesn't tie in as perfectly, or you know, if you're not quite as good at Photoshop or as fast, then you know it's ineffective. And so you want to find something that you can utilize that makes sense for you, and being able to do it quickly, immediately, really is important, because it has to happen during the campaign. You're trying to hook people to get them to give money while the campaign is going on. And so like my last campaign for my feature film, it's called About a Donkey. It's about a family essentially that gets a donkey, and I was just downloading photos of donkeys off the internet and creating like speech bubbles, and everyone got a unique photo with like a unique thing in their bubble and a link to the campaign at the bottom. And people were like, what are all these photos of donkeys? They were clicking through because, you know, animals tend to catch people's attention on the internet. And so like that worked for me, and it didn't cost me anything but time, and it was super easy and whatever. We've seen people do things like, if they're shooting in a really beautiful location, every person will get like a unique landscape still. There's like different ways that you can utilize what you have, but the main thing is to, you know, be personalized and shareable, visual, like as visual as possible, and utilize the skills that maybe you necessarily don't have, but other people on your team may have, like if they happen to be really good at Photoshop or whatever. But that's incentives. Pitch videos are key to crowdfunding, like really, really important. that's the one thing that everyone will interact with. Some people may decide that they just want to give you $25 and not going to even look at your incentives. Or, you know, they're not going to look at your wish list to see how you're spending the money. They just want to give you $25 and that's it. The one thing they will do is watch your pitch video. Everyone watches your pitch video. And in film, it's especially imperative because it is the medium that you're trying to make. And so, like, someone who's, you know, putting together an album, they can make a kind of crappy pitch video because that's not the skill set that they're working in. But like your pitch video as a filmmaker can be crappy because it's a reflection of your skills as a filmmaker. And for some reason, filmmakers don't like make that connection, and often they'll have bad sound. And like no one is going to struggle to hear you ask them for money. You need to have a certain polish. And honestly, like as long as you have good sound, just like choose a good environment where it's not noisy. You don't have to spend money on a ton of sound gear. Just like I remember from one of my pitch videos, I just used the app on my phone to record so that it was like close even though the camera was far away, and like that was good enough. And then your phone, like you can get beautiful images on your phone. Just have good framing, you know, use your skill as a filmmaker to create an aesthetic. And then we have found that you have 15 seconds to hook your audience or they stop watching, statistically speaking. And so because you're audience building, you know, it's not about your friends or your family like clicking play and seeing your face. Like they want to see your face, but no one else wants to see your face. They want to see the thing that you're trying to sell them on. And so we think that you should really try and set the tone of what you're making. If you're making, you know, a horror film, you should try and scare them. If you're making a comedy, you should make them laugh. But you should really like show off that aesthetic and set that tone. And that could be with test footage, if you can shoot some stuff. Could be with past work footage, if it's similar in tone. Shutterstock is a sponsor of our class, and those sheets I handed out, that's from them. They are really great. We offer you a discount if you give me your email and I send you the deck. They offer a discount. They're really great for like, you know, if you're trying to say like your film is set in Chicago and you need some footage of Chicago, you can get that off of Shutterstock. They're like you're trying to show a party because your film is like set at a party, you can get that footage from Shutterstock. So like that's ways to work within your budget. I usually just use past work footage, or with my feature, my last campaign, we shot the first scene of the film self-funded, and then used footage from that scene to open our pitch video and use as B-roll throughout our pitch video, and then we use the funds to then shoot the rest of the film. And so like that was what I did. There are a lot of ways that you can be creative and you don't have to really spend a lot of money. And also if you give me your email, one of the things we send you in that email is a list of some of our favorite pitch videos that were done on like a small budget as well, like essentially no budget. But the thing is, okay, beyond setting the tone, yes, you want to show off the thing, but trailers alone are not enough. Trailers make people want to watch it. That doesn't make them want to be part of it. Pitch videos are what make them want to be part of it, and that's all about the why. So you have about 2 minutes. We found that after 2 minutes people stop watching, so you really have to get to your call to action at that point. And so I always say like cap it at 2 minutes. 15 to 20 seconds of opening footage that sets the tone, and then your pitch. Then you go into your pitch. You appear on screen. You do have to be in it because people connect with the person whose passion is behind the project. That doesn't mean you have to do all the pitching. If you don't feel comfortable on screen, you can say, "Hi, you know, I'm Christina Rhea. I'm the director of this project. Let my actors tell you about what it is." You know, like you can let the more charismatic people get on screen. But the point is that you want to be like the face that they see, and then it's all about who you are and the team that's behind it, not just like you, but the people that are collaborating, because you want people to join that team. That's what you're asking of them. And then what, very concisely, what is the story? Because story is everything. And then why? Why does it matter? Why now? Why does it? Why should they care? Why your vision for it? And all that needs to happen essentially in 90 seconds. And then you have a call to action that's like, join us in making this thing by making a contribution, following the campaign, and sharing it. Something like that. And that's 2 minutes, and that's like the perfect pitch video. And so really, before you go into a campaign, it is really all about making sure that you have the visuals to make a pitch video more than just like you in front of a laptop saying like, join me in making this thing. Because that's just not enough to hook people these days. We have seen, like I can tell you with my very first pitch video, it was that in 2011, like me in front of a laptop saying, I'm gonna make a film and it's gonna be really funny, and like there was nothing funny about my pitch videos. There was no evidence that I could be funny. and I ended up changing it like a week into my campaign. I swapped it out for a much better pitch video that like showed off how I could make you laugh and also was like just more polished and looked like I had actually like framed it out instead of just sitting in front of my laptop screen, and that was much more effective. And so really that's where like your effort needs to go before you even launch the campaign, outside of sort of the audience building. Okay, so our success rate is twice any other platform. Currently it's at 85%. Last year it was 75%. Like I generally will say it's around 80% depending on.
I'm sorry, could you go back to the last slide for just a second?
Sure.
That was just too, a little bit.
If you, I don't know if you heard, but if you give me your email address,
Right.
I'll send this to you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the main thing about our platform is that we're the only platform that guarantees every single campaign feedback. We look over your pitch video, we look over your incentives, and we kind of talk to you about the size of your goal and make sure that you're in the best position possible to succeed. The main thing to know is that it is like, it can be a process depending on where you come in. People who take this class have a 90% success rate and generally come in like far more prepared because they've already been prepped. But I always say that you should submit 2 weeks before you want to go live just to be safe in case you have to make video revisions or anything like that. And also, like, the sooner the better. You can always submit as a work in progress. You can submit your video before it's fully done because odds are I'm going to give you some like notes on editing it a bit anyway. But yeah. Okay, having a schedule is really important during a campaign, not just to be organized, but also because you want to know how things are going and be able to check what could be changed. Like, if you got a ton of traffic and contributions last Tuesday, but this Tuesday you're not getting any, you can say like, what was I doing differently? Let me check my schedule. What was planned for that day? What kind of press did we get that day? You know, who shared it that day? You want to be able to track all of that, and we do have a template on our site that you can download. But generally, you want to be able to track how things are going, and you want to remain flexible because the same way that like, you know, you want to go into film production with a plan, but also know that things can go wrong and you want to be able to pivot. The same thing with crowdfunding. You want to have a plan, but you also want to be able to change things that aren't working. And generally speaking, I think that like the same way your production is sort of won or lost in the pre-production stage and the work and the effort that you do, same thing with crowdfunding. Like the real work is long before that 30 days, you know, starts counting down. Okay, if all this sounds like a ton of work, it absolutely is. You know, we have lives, we have jobs, we have families, we have school, we have a variety of things, and crowdfunding is a full-time job for the length of the campaign, and so it can be a lot for one person, and honestly, like, I don't recommend crowdfunding alone. It is about finding the people who can fill the gaps. So like, if you work a 9 to 5, you want to have someone who can be managing the campaign during those hours. You want to have people who have different skills than you do. Like I am always the face of my campaign, and I appear in my pitch video, and I'm usually like the manager of the campaign, and I'm doing the language, and like I'm writing the script for my pitch video and all of that. But I'm not editing my own pitch video. I'm not making the graphics because that's not my skill set. I'm not doing a lot of like the tech stuff because that's not like my strength. And so I have collaborators who do that kind of stuff. And so my thing is always like, anyone who's working on the film should probably work on the crowdfunding campaign because they have the skills that apply to what you have to do for it, and you can build in, like, if you're paying them, you can build that into the campaign goal. Anyone who's a producer on the film, anyone who has an above the line position, I think like should absolutely be participating in outreach because ultimately this is audience building, and having an audience benefits everyone. And like producing in my mind is these days, and so like anyone who gets a producer title should absolutely be offering up their email list and participating in outreach, and like that is sort of a deal breaker for me. Like if I'm attaching a producer, it's like, are you going to participate in outreach for a crowdfunding campaign? Because that's their job, is to help build the audience, to help find the funds, and it is like you really can't do it alone. And so, you know, I've crowdfunded 4 times, and I have, most of the outreach is me, but I also have a co-producer, and so like the 2 of us tend to really tackle our networks. At this point, we kind of have like a built-in base of people we know will support us every time, but we're still doing a lot of like sending out emails to everyone we've ever encountered in our lives, and like knocking on doors and sharing on social, and so it's just a lot of work, and you want to make sure that people will join in. If you're just getting started, you know, these collaborators could be your friends, they could be your family, it could be anyone who's willing to just like help out. But ideally, you'd be getting to a point where your sort of main collaborators are also the main collaborators of the crowdfunding campaign. Okay, so during a campaign, you want to make sure that you are really sending emails to everyone and it is direct. I had someone in a class once say that she sent an email to 800 people, and she didn't get any contributions. And I asked her, did she send one email to 800 people or did she send 800 individual emails? And she said she sent one email to 800 people. That's not direct messaging. The key is being able to say to someone like a why that will matter to them. And so I have a higher conversion rate than the average. The average is 30%. My average is probably like 40 to 45% email outreach, and that's because I'm super organized about my email list. Whenever I collect an email, whenever I like get a business card at a screening, I will make note of like who it was, where we met, what screening it was it one of my screenings, was it like a festival that I was attending, was it a networking event, was it at a class, what are some of the things we talked about, if we talked about anything. So then I can sort of collect that data, and then when I'm ready to crowdfund, I take those emails and I break them up into categories and say like, well, I met this person at a horror film festival, and I'm not making a horror film right now, but I know like this thing was interesting to them, so maybe I can find a way to make that apply to what I'm currently making. And then when I'm ready to reach out, I have like templates for all these different categories, but they're personalized in the email. So like, this is my LGBTQ representation category. That's what people care about in this category. So my general pitch is going to be the same, but my opening is going to say, hi so-and-so, it was so lovely to meet you at Outfest. I hope you've been well since fall. I hope your project, blah, blah, blah. Here's my thing that I'm working on. So like that is a copy and paste, but that opening is not. You're being as personalized as possible. And that's really what you want to be doing during a campaign. And then you can send out reminders. Like I have a newsletter, and that's sort of like blanket, mass emailing. And I have, like Green Inbox helps you sort of follow up with people, and that's like an easy service to pay for that, usually works out because you get higher contributions than what you're spending on it. But you really want to focus on direct emails, and like I have found that I'll send like one email when I started the campaign, and then 3 weeks in I'm following up with anyone that didn't get back to me, and most people will contribute after that second email because they just needed that reminder. We'll talk more about that in a second, but direct emails are where it's at. And then updates are really important because you want to make sure that you have interesting things to share with the people that have contributed, and you give them stuff to share with their networks. Most people will only share your campaign once, twice if you're lucky, once when it goes live and then once when it's about to end. It's very hard during that middle period to get anyone to share your campaign. So you want to give them exciting things to share out that makes it feel like there's progress being made. And so, anyone you've attached to the project, like, oh, you just cast your actor, send out an update with like a video of that actor, their reel, or a meet the cast video, or what else they've worked on. You want to have things that people can say like, hey, this film that I supported just attached their lead actor, stuff like that. And then social media is a great way to entice people. You want to share like snippets of what exists in your updates. So like, you have a Meet the Cast video that's 2 minutes long, you share 20 seconds of it on social media and say, hey, you want to see the rest, check out our campaign. But it's a great way to like get people inward towards the campaign. And then I always do in my updates a like tweet of the day. So people always want to share, but they don't want to have to like figure out what to say. They could waste a lot of time trying to figure out the right words and then just decide not to do it at all. And so you want to say like, hey, here's a tweet of the day, copy and paste. And you're giving them the thing to say to share the latest news. This is a photo of me at Pride in 2014 with my co-producer and best friend. We were planning to go to Pride anyway, but we decided to wear shirts that were promoting our campaign that we had going on. And we decided that we weren't going to like bother people at Pride, to ask them to contribute to our campaign, but we were using hashtag NYC Pride, which was trending that day, and we were including the link to our campaign. So we had a ton of like traffic to our campaign because we jumped on something that was trending. And then we also got an update out of it. We sent an update to our supporters showing us that Pride, talking to people about our film. And so that was a great way to utilize things that were already happening in the world. So you want to definitely get out into the world, think about what's going on, and jump on those bandwagons. Like think about how what you're making exists in what's happening in the broader sense. I had a filmmaker who was making a web series about superhero villains, and I told them they should crowdfund during Comic-Con and go to Comic-Con, you know. And so like that's sort of something you want to think about. Okay, as I said, you want to keep communication going. You want to always be like reviewing your messaging, seeing what's working, seeing what's not, thanking people. You can never thank people too much. You want to learn from your data. Our dashboard on Seed&Spark allows you to interpret like where people are coming from, your top traffic sources, you know, how you're doing, and that allows you to make changes based on what is and isn't working. And then you want to continue asking people to learn from them. You want to ask people who contributed, why they contributed, what hooked them, where they found out about you, so you can try and replicate those conditions or like reshare those visuals that worked on them. And then, as I said, on average, only 30% of a team's full network will contribute. That means that on average, 70% will not. That can be very disappointing. I have definitely experienced like expecting someone to contribute and they ignore me, and I just want to like write them off in my life. But that's not healthy, and that's not really what you want to do. You want to reach out to them and follow up and find out why, because you may find out that like maybe they just forgot because they're not living in this bubble that you're living in where nothing matters but this goal. Maybe they have other things going on, like, you know, obviously their lives, you know, complicated. They could have lost their job. Maybe they don't have the money right now. Maybe they were too embarrassed to say that, and that's why they ignored you. And you can give them different actions. You can say, well, I totally get that. Alternatively, you can follow the campaign, which is free. You can share the campaign, which is free. Or you can get someone else to contribute on your behalf, which is free for you. And you can even like offer incentives for that. It's like, hey, you can't give $25, but if you get someone else to give $25, I'll give you that incentive anyway. You know, and so like you can work with people. And then worst case scenario, they may say that they're just not into it. Like that's just not my kind of, you know, content. And that may be hurtful to hear, but like it will be really helpful because you can say, okay, you're not my audience. How do I avoid spending more time on you and people like you? Like how do I learn from this? And so that's really important. And then continue like researching new opportunities. People that you reached out for partnerships may have ignored you before the campaign, but now that they see the success and momentum behind it, they may actually pay attention to you now. And so you don't want to like just give up because the success is what will hook people potentially. You want to continue supporting others, and like as I said, you just can't say thank you enough. The more you thank people, the more likely they are to like double their pledge when you're getting down to the wire, which has happened to me. I've had people quadruple their pledge like in the last 24 hours because we're only X% away and they want to be the hero that gets us there. Okay, after your campaign, you're going to want to like take a nap because it's going to be really exhausting. And then you want to make sure that you make the thing you promised and you deliver on all the incentives. That's really key. I'm basically wrapping up now, but I'd like to tell a quick story. There was a guy who gave to my second crowdfunding campaign, which was for my first feature on Kickstarter, and he gave $100. He was a total stranger. I looked at his profile and saw that he just gave to a lot of campaigns, and so I thanked him personally, and then I also thanked him on social, and then pretty much like didn't talk to him again because he was a stranger. But I gave him all the incentives that he was promised, and 2 years later, I had spent like months or years, 2 years later, I had spent like probably at least once a month sending an update about the progress of the film and like what I learned. I did a whole blog series on what I learned making my first feature on like basically $15,000 and in like crazy conditions. We shot that film in Massachusetts in January in -degree weather. It was absolutely insane. I'll never do it again, but it was quite an experience. And because I was promising people like an inside look into that experience, I had, you know, behind the scenes videos of us shooting like in the snow, and I had interviews with the cast and crew, asking them what it was like to shoot in those conditions. I would do like before and afters of our picture lock and like our color correction and our sound mix. I did like a ton of blogging, and then every festival we screened, I did a recap with photos, and I would send all that out in updates. And so anyway, 2 years later, I was crowdfunding on Seed&Spark for 2 short films, and I reached out to this guy and I said, I thanked him again for contributing and said, I hope you like Summit, because at that point he had gotten his copy of my film. And he responded immediately and said, Christina, it's so lovely to hear from you. I have to say, I've given to so many campaigns and so many filmmakers, like you never hear from them again, or they never make the film, or they just they only get back in touch when they want something, like for you to share their view, do you release the film or something like that. And he was like, I have so enjoyed watching you grow as a filmmaker. You really made me feel included, and I enjoyed getting to see behind the scenes of the film and then watching the film. And so he asked what on my wish list, well first he asked what made Seed&Spark different from Kickstarter, and I explained it to him. And then he asked what on my wish list was most important to me, and I told him paying my cast and crew, because I didn't pay every single person last time, and that was why I was running the campaign this time. And within 5 minutes of that, he fulfilled the remaining balance, which was $1,000. And so he went from a total stranger who gave me $100 to essentially still being a stranger who gave me $1,000, because I had just blogged about making my movie, And so it may feel like you're knocking on doors for $5 here and $25 here and $10 here, but you never know who it really matters to. And these updates and sharing the experience with people really matters, because while even 60% of people won't even read them, a good percentage of them are really, that's what they paid for, that's what they want, and it really matters, and it could translate into higher contributions down the line. And in fact, he got laid off in 2016, and when I was crowdfunding in 2017, he still managed to give me $150, despite not having a job at the time. And so that was amazing, And I've had other people sort of give me around that kind of money, and they're total strangers. Okay, and just to plug another one of our sponsors, NCrawl. You get a discount from them in that same email. They will take care of your credits for you, and what's really great about them is that they'll continue to export new credits as you add more people, because as you're running your campaign, you're going to have 300 names you need to put in your credits and special thanks, and you'll realize you've forgotten someone 6 months later, and you've added a distributor, so you need to add them to the credits. So you can always get in touch with NCrawl, and they'll do it for you, and they're cool people, and so you should check them out. And then that's pretty much it. I'm personally an advocate for self-distribution. There are different, schools of thought there, but generally speaking, I don't think that festivals are for distribution anymore. They're not really industry focused, unless you're talking about the top ones, which are mostly inviting films anyway, or the people that already exist in the industry. And so what festivals are great for, in my opinion, are meeting the kinds of people who care about independent film and pay to watch independent movies. And so I use every festival experience as a way to collect email addresses. I have had people who contributed to who went to see my first feature at a festival, then give $25 to my second feature 3 years later, and they're totally different genres. And so it's really about creating those authentic connections with people and understanding that it's about you and your vision. And so when I was on the festival circuit with my first feature, at that point I was 2 years removed from it, and it was so flawed, and I had a love-hate relationship with it. But I needed to get on every stage and acknowledge that these people had just paid to watch my movie, and there were people who worked on it and put all of their hearts and souls and work into it. And so I needed to acknowledge that, and also understand that these people need to like me because I want them to support me again. And so it was getting up on a stage and thanking people and talking about why I made the film, and trying to find that passion that I had for it when I was first making it, even though at that point I had creatively moved on from it. And so you want to really think about that, and always look for every opportunity that you engage with people as an opportunity to turn those people into your audience and your amplifiers for your career as a whole, not just for that particular project. You should never let the end of a film mean the loss of all the people that watched it and supported it. They should be following you to the next thing. And so you want to create that opportunity. And then, as I said, you can look into our site and check out distribution if that's of interest. But that's pretty much it. Feel free to follow me or Seed&Spark on social media. You can also send me an email, christina@seedandspark.com, if you have any questions. But I'm also sticking around, so happy to chat with you all about your projects and answer any questions about crowdfunding or filmmaking or Seed&Spark or any of the things. Thank you. get one of these sheets, or if you still have to pass it up, I can collect that. But yeah, if anyone has questions, please. Yes, I don't know where they are.
Just my copy.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
I haven't filled out yet.
Okay. Oh, great. Thank you.
Well, one question, I have for you. When you work on an ongoing project like a web series,
Yeah.
what would be the difference,
Do you have some more?
designing the fundraising campaign for something like that?
more? She gave them.
I might. I don't, but if any can look at one.
I'll go make some of the photocopy machine.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Christina,
Yes.
thanks for this wonderful presentation. A lot of things I've learned, not really as active in social media as I should be. I'm just trying to establish myself, but I am a writer, period.
Okay.
Okay. Seed&Spark, based upon what I've gathered here, really works with people who've already produced some type of film, whether it's shorts or whether it's a trailer or whether it's something to visual aid to help build a campaign.
Well,
what have you done for writers specifically?
we have had writers crowdfund for like development
For
or
development,
yeah,
okay.
or to like get a producer
Uh-huh.
attached. So it's totally possible. You do still want to set the tone in some way of what you're making, and so if you're not specifically a filmmaker, the options are to use. If you have any collaborators that are filmmakers that might be working on the end product, then use their past work footage, or use like Shutterstock or some similar service where you can just use like stock footage that will allow you to set the tone of what you're making. But you can actually, if you go on Seed&Spark.com, and actually I'll pull up the website. You can just actually search by development, so you can see other projects that have raised for development funds, and then that will allow you to kind of see what other writers have done.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. These are some of our campaigns right now. We are also, I didn't mention this, but I think it sort of reads through to some degree, but we are an inclusion-focused platform, and so we decided after the 2016 election that we weren't going to be apolitical, and so we are committed to underrepresented voices and highlighting diversity. And in order to crowdfund with us, you have to fill out an inclusion statement that is just like how your project is inclusive in some capacity or how you're challenging the status quo of representation. And so like 60% of our filmmakers are women, which is like different from most stats of other platforms. That does not mean that we exclude men, but we do want to see men who are being inclusive of women or are like underrepresented in their own identity in some capacity. We just have a lot of like LGBTQ inclusive projects in general. But yeah, we're looking for like on the streaming side as well. We're looking for content that is aiming to showcase like the true diversity of the country we live in. Any other questions?
Well, the question that
Yes,
I
you
asked, the difference in crowdfunding for ongoing projects, like for example, web series.
Yeah,
Things like
so to some degree you have the advantage if you're coming back for like more, because you have now a fan base that really cares about that thing and wants more of that thing. If you're just starting, you're trying to get people hooked for a web series. There have been different ways that people do it. I've seen people raise money for just a pilot and then they come back and want more episodes. However, I'm personally an advocate for like treating a season of a web series like production for a feature, because I made a web series, I have a 10-episode web series, and like after we released our first season, our actors started exploding, and now you can see them, like one of them is on that Showtime show Billions, and like scheduling them or like keeping them for another season is nearly impossible. And so like if you shot a pilot and then you wanted to come back like 6 months later for a series, it may be hard because you maybe lose some of your actors in that time or something like that. So I alternatively though, I've seen people shoot like a pilot, or they shoot just like a 2-minute kind of like taste of that series with the actors they intend to cast, and then they raise for the whole series. And so like, I think it is helpful to have some kind of taste of what the thing will be to get people excited about something that will be long form like that, like ongoing. But that doesn't mean that you have to only raise for like the pilot, or that you have to make the pilot before you raise for the series. Yeah. It really varies. It also depends on like who's associated with it, and if it's just going to be like you and then you're the only creative mind behind the series, or if it's like a collaborative thing of multiple writers and multiple directors, then you probably have like a better chance of just raising flat out for the whole season, because you have the numbers are just greater, they're more on your side. Yeah. And so it's not so reliant on like you proving that you can make this thing.
Yeah, because you mentioned that Seed&Spark is a multi-stage platform. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like that's, how would you utilize that particular
Yeah, so if you, let's see, there's a series called Docket 32357. It's like, I don't know if it's on here. That's the one that comes to mind. They have crowdfunded 3 times for 3 seasons, and they always come back to the same campaign page, and so they have like thousands of followers on that campaign page, and like the first one probably had 500 followers, and they just kept building over time. And now the second season, the first season I think is free online, but the second season is in our cinema. But that's an example. But yeah, so it's like, it's really great because people are following the campaign, and then like you release the series, and then they know that the next campaign is coming, and they know exactly where it'll be. They're already like paying attention. You're probably putting out episodes in the updates of that campaign, and then now you're going to launch another campaign. So it's like very built for ongoing content. I have not crowdfunded for a second season in that way, but like it's very, I think it's easier because you have a fan base now that's like, yeah, I want more of this. I love these characters. I want more.
Have you had production companies that would use that platform for multiple projects, even though the projects are separate projects?
So I crowdfunded, my first campaign was, or my first campaign on Seed&Spark was for shorts, and it was just under my production company. Film-related business, there we go. We have had quite a few production companies raise like for their entire slate of shorts they're going to make this year, or they're raising for development to make something, like we have one campaign, let me see if it'll come up. Well, this is a friend of mine, Millennial Renaissance Media, Teresa Baker. She runs like a one-stop hub for women of color, and so like she wasn't raising funds for any particular project. She was raising funds to create a studio within her apartment, but also like she had a general list of the kinds of content she was interested in eventually producing, and so that's what she was hooking an audience for. It was like, I'm looking to make content with like women of color on screen and behind the scenes, and like tackles sort of like millennial life as a woman of color in New York. So it was like very specific. So it was like the people that cared about that content, they weren't necessarily expecting it, a film or a series immediately, but they understood that they were investing in the potential for that. And then Turtle Dove Films is the one that I was about to mention before. They were like, we make content. They're in Austin. I don't remember what their sort of like hook is, the kind of content they make, but they were like, we make this kind of content, this theme is through all of our work, we're looking to make a web series and 3 shorts this year, and we're looking to raise like $30,000 for that total thing. And so like that's something that they did. So yeah, you could approach it in a variety of ways. We even had people do like anthology based campaigns where it's like 5 directors are making shorts that all revolve around the same theme, so they're doing one crowdfunding campaign together for like one lump sum as opposed to individually, because then they were going to like share their insurance and they were going to share like a lot of different aspects of the production, so that it made sense to lump them together even if they weren't going to.
Do they still have individual pages for each project?
They did not, no.
That's interesting, okay.
Is that a Seed&Spark page? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, this is the website.
Okay.
I'm just showing the crowdfunding side.
How successful have the campaigns for development funds been?
They have been, their success rate is pretty on point with our average success rate, but I will say that they are probably the least common of the stages that are raised for, because it is harder to some degree if you haven't proven yourself as a filmmaker to like promise that there will be an end product, because it's so far. And so it is harder. That said, it's not impossible. We have seen people do it. It's just all about contextualizing it for people so they understand what development actually is and how long they'll be waiting to see it. And also it's like you're not actually, you're buying into the potential of something, and it's contingent on us being able to secure this other funding or whatever the conditions are. And most of the time people will come on board for that, but it is easier if you have someone established associated with it that has at least like delivered in some degree in the past. But yeah, like if you're raising for a low amount of development, you could just like friend and family fund as a means to then like build an audience for another stage. But if you're trying, like we had one campaign that raised for, I'm trying to remember what it was called. Something blue something, I don't know. But it was a filmmaker named Jen West. She raised for 2 shorts previously, and so she raised for development, and she raised $30,000, which is a lot in terms of crowdfunding just for development. And she was like, look, this is $1 million feature. You're giving money to get me in the rooms with the right people to get that kind of funding. Understand that like we may not get in those rooms and we may not make this end product, but if we don't, I will make a short version of it with the money you've given me. And so like that was sort of her way of getting people on board, so that they knew that they were not necessarily going to come out of it with the end feature, but that they would get something out of it, and that she was like worth investing in because she had already delivered on 2 shorts. And so she's someone who could do that. You may want to go for a lower amount if you haven't delivered previously, because it can be hard to hook people for just development in that sense.
In terms of this stuff that's kind of ganged itself up together because of a similar theme, how successful is that stuff been?
Very successul. Usually it's like very specific. Like we had one that was, what was it called? It was 9 lives, I think it was called 9 lives. That would make sense. It was a anthology of 9 women directors making genre films. And so it was like super specific to a genre and to like a type of representation. Usually those succeed though, because the thing about that though is it can be really frustrating if you are like 5 filmmakers teaming together and then one filmmaker just like isn't doing the work, but is like benefiting from everyone else's work. And so you want to make sure that you trust the people you're doing it with and that they're really going to do as much work as you. And you want to sort of like, before, I would recommend, this isn't a requirement by any means, but I would recommend like tallying up email addresses and seeing like who has more or less, or are you all on sort of even playing fields, like where's the starting point, and knowing like who has to pick up more slack, or you know where there might be weaknesses.
What if the subject matter is very specifically the same subject matter? Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It does, because the more specific you can be in crowdfunding, the better. So when I crowdfunded for my short films, we were crowdfunding under our production company name, and we were utilizing our web series that we had just finished as like a way to show what we could do. But the shorts that we were making were very different genre from the web series, and we still raised $24,000, but it was like really hard to get people to understand what they were giving to, other than just like giving to us and more stuff from us. And I was at a point where it was my third Crowdfunding campaign. I'd already made a feature. I'd already made like a 10-episode web series and like 7 shorts. And so people were like, yeah, I'll invest in Christina Ray. Like, so I had that privilege. But if I were trying to do that for my first campaign, I think I would have had a really hard time articulating what anyone was actually backing, because it was like there wasn't any specificity around it. So yeah, the more specific you can be, the more you can say like, we're making a thing about this, the better off you are.
Not to hog the room time, so to be specific, for whatever reason, kind of how the world works, I've recently encountered got like 3 to 4 different films all about dance,
Okay.
including his. And I just started thinking, but they all have very different influencer levels. So since they are all so about dance, I felt like I started thinking it might be easier to kind of gang these up, even despite people's different influencer levels.
Yeah, I would say that absolutely, because that's your main hook. Films about dance, and then each filmmaker could just like, or each, you know, whoever. I
mean, they all have nuance.
Right, and
what
so
is
like
about dance and virtual reality. What is about dance and.
That's cool though, because then you, in a pitch video, then it would just sort of be very, very concisely like what makes each one different, but they're unified through this one point of interest. And so it gives you like, okay, you want to support this campaign because you care about films that feature dance, but then you want to support this, you want to see all of these because they're each giving you something different. And so like, I think that absolutely works.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is just a brass tacks kind of question about email, because you mentioned, you know, there's tools like MailChimp, but you do have you done a combination, or are you recommending a combination of like sending out some general updates, but really primarily using the strategic targeting, like, hey Jennifer, hey Thomas?
Yeah, so like I send actual emails right from my email account to individuals, and then MailChimp for me is like the reminder newsletter.
Okay.
And because like you can't, with MailChimp, there's no way you can hide the fact that it is a newsletter platform. Like there's a little thing at the bottom that says they can unsubscribe. Like there's nothing that will feel truly personalized when they know that it's going out in that capacity. But you can use like on Gmail, you can create like a canned email. I don't know if you guys know how to do that. You just like save it as a canned email, you title it something, and then you just like insert it, and it just puts the whole body into your email. And so then I was just doing that and just like changing the who I'm talking to and like the opening sentences. But yeah, that's really how you want to do it. Or even like Facebook, you know, a lot of the people I emailed, depending on their age, like they didn't respond to email the first time, so then I tried them on Facebook Messenger because I could see from the green dot that they were online, and I got a response immediately. And so that is a form of email that I'm talking about. It's like the ability to send someone a Facebook message in that way. There are also people who I have sent Facebook messages to who never had a green dot because they don't have Messenger on their phone, and they're probably never turned on, so they never even saw that Facebook message, and they needed that email, like, because that's what they check. They check their email.
My daughter's laughing at me because that's me.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Less about Messenger.
Oh, just one follow-up on that. When you talk about adding people to your email list or building your email list, you're primarily talking about meeting people at networking events and exchanging business cards. You're not talking about having like a sign-up form on your, like, I'm not as familiar with the Seed&Spark platform, but there's not like a built-in sign-up form like join my email list, is there? Or
well, so on my campaign, for instance, my last campaign, anyone who, well, I'll just show you my dashboard. Anyone who contributed or follows my campaign, if I export this right here, it includes the email address of anyone who follows my campaign. So anytime I get a new follower, I ran this campaign a year and a half ago now, and we're still getting followers because I'm still sending out updates. And so every new follower, I can get their email address by downloading that. So that is a way, and then as I said, I would categorize in the same way. So like I put them in my overall spreadsheet and say like they came through the About a Donkey crowdfunding campaign. And then I will like try and see if there's crossover. Like, are they already a subscriber to my production company newsletter, or do I already have their email because we met in some other way? And if not, then like that's the category they go in. They go in specifically they're an About a Donkey's supporter or follower. So yeah, you can. When I collect emails though, at festivals, I do get business cards, but also when I do a Q&A, I will be that awkward person that's just like, I have a pen and paper if anyone wants to stay up to date on my work, like I'd love to collect your email. And I don't know, probably like 20% of people will do it. And so yeah, like that's a good way to meet people where they're at. Because like in New York it's different, but when I go to regional festivals or any like small town festivals, the people in attendance are not filmmakers, they're like locals who are like, it's a thing to do in my town. And those are the people you want to reach, and those are people that don't have business cards, like so they need to write down their email on a piece of paper.
And you manage that in a spreadsheet, not by dumping them all into something like MailChimp or...
No, I have a Google Doc spreadsheet, and everyone's color-coded. And then I also keep track of the emails that also exist on MailChimp in my newsletter. But I try not to automatically put anyone on my newsletter, except in the case of like, if you gave to my campaign, when you sign up for Seed&Spark, you're confirming that you want to receive our updates. And so then when the campaign ended, I sent out a message and was like, hey, I'm adding everyone to my general newsletter so that you can see all the other stuff we're doing. If you want to unsubscribe, then unsubscribe. And so like that's sort of the way that I've gotten away with doing that. But I won't do it to anyone who just like gives me a business card, unless like they ask to be on my newsletter, and then I'm like, yeah, I'll totally do that.
What's your frequency in your newsletter?
I send it once per month. I don't think that, like I wouldn't do it more than that because people, like I subscribe to so many newsletters and I like it monthly. I don't really like it more. The Seed&Spark newsletter goes out weekly. You can unsubscribe, but if you sign up as a free member, you will get it. And what's cool about that is that we plug campaigns that are on our site, and we also offer like discounts and stuff in our newsletter, so it's like incentivizing people to stay subscribed. But like in my personal newsletter, I also run a monthly screening series called IndieWorks. We screen local shorts. We screen shorts by local filmmakers exclusively, usually the second Tuesday of every month. And so like my newsletter, the new thing every month will be like the next date of IndieWorks, but then I also have updates about all our other projects. So like if you came in for About a Donkey, there's something for About a Donkey there, but there's also like if you came in because of IndieWorks, you're always going to know the next date. So I try to keep it like a consistent format so people know that they're getting the latest news from like my umbrella production company. And so it feels like I'm really selling you anything. I'm usually just like keeping you updated, which is what it's for. And so yeah, I have a pretty high. I think the average is like 33% of people open it, which is like high in the world of newsletters, but still like think about that during a crowdfunding campaign. Only let's say like 25% of people are going to open it, and so you need to be sending emails directly through your own email because not everyone's going to open a newsletter type of email. It might even go to their spam, you know. And so yeah. Any other questions?
Actually, quick question request.
Yeah.
Is there a platform, or is it possible to see a micro-budget packaging, basically, when you're preparing your film or web series, just to have a sample, you know, what documentation is involved, and actually the budget itself is actually interesting, how the breakdown happens on a, you know, 15K or 20K production.
Right. I don't know of any that have offered that. I know like nofilmschool.com is always offering like things about producing, so I would assume that if you searched on there, there might be someone who shared their actual budget. I actually saw someone do that recently. I'll see if I can find the link. It was $250,000 feature of that.
As a line producer, can I please just say, don't copy other people's budgets. Every film has its own DNA. It's on the page. You read the script, it tells you what it costs. You may not like what you hear, but it tells you what it costs.
There are definitely things like maybe you don't know to budget for though that like you would get from looking at budgets. So I assume also just like being part of this group that you could probably ask them to get you like, right? They would have samples or something to show.
I think we're just now coming together in that regard because most people were just working on their individual projects.
Sure.
So this is like the first attempt to bring it all together.
Right.
Yeah.
I do, my feature about a donkey costs $22,000 after post, and I put out a blog post recently about how we made it, and I didn't share like our full budget breakdown, but I did essentially like categorize where we spent the money and how we managed to make a film on essentially $20,000. So you can check that out on my blog if you'd like, on my website, congested.cat.com, and the updates. If you search about a donkey, you'll come across it by the second page.
I also found an article online when I was Googling it because I needed an estimated budget right away, and I found a really good article on how much you can expect to spend for a feature.
Right. Yeah.
And there's always there's the estimate and there's the actual.
Of course.
The estimate is just you got to figure out what the numbers should be, and then after you figure out what the numbers should be.
But the producer needs to do the footwork of finding out how much it
a lot of
costs to
work.
rent. And, you know.
And then if somebody does a favor for you, you put a zero in the actual. But until that favor's done, it costs what it costs. And that's why I always try to warn people about it. Oh, my friend's going to do this, and this one's going to do that. That's great. But what's the estimated number on it so that you know when you are going into this, like, if this doesn't come through, that line item costs this number. If it comes through, great. Once it's done, zero. I love zeros in the actual. It's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
It's just not real until it's real.
Totally. I mean, like when my second feature, originally we projected that it would cost $250,000, like that's what we wanted to make it on, and then we, at a certain point, we're like, well, you know, we're not getting into these rooms where that money exists, and so we can raise $20,000. Can we make this film on $20,000? And so then I started from a legitimate budget that I like had in place of estimates, and then I was like, well, where can I cut all of these costs, or where can I find this stuff for free? And then like I ended up making a film through like a ton of community support where every single location was free and all of our food was donated, and like we didn't have to rent a single vehicle because it was all donated to us. But that was from like hitting the pavement and knocking on 1 million doors, and like that was work I didn't pay myself for. And so it's sort of like you should absolutely know what everything should cost, but then it's like what it will actually cost. In my view of filmmaking is largely about like the community you've built and what the resources you have and where you can find ways to like create partnerships and get people to feel involved through the offering of stuff. And so like that's my approach to filmmaking, because I know that I don't have access to the kind of money to do things at the like cost that they are traditionally supposed to be. But you know, you should absolutely look up templates, at least to like know, okay, you want to be able to budget for like insurance and contingency and like these kinds of things that you would need if you're shooting in this kind of location and stuff like that. But yeah, having also attaching a line producer in general would just be super helpful. Any other
Line
questions?
producer and a lawyer.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Sorry, because I was here so late, I don't know if you touched on, like if you make a portion of the film and use that portion to further crowdfund, is that more successful or just equally successful, or, you know?
It's equally successful, I would say. It's all about creating context and urgency. So like if you're crowdfunding before a thing exists, then it's all about saying, hey, like, look at all these pieces we have in place, look at all these people that are attached, look at how ready to go we are, we just need you to get involved so that we can make it happen. Like, it won't happen without you. But if you've already shot some of it, or you've already, you have shot all of it, but you're raising for post, then the tone is more like, look at all the work we've done, look at how close we are, don't let all this work go to waste, we need to finish it, we can't do that without you. And so it's just like creating that context with people and making them understand what that means. And the thing is, like, the advantage of raising for production is that people understand why you need money because none of it exists yet. However, the advantage of raising for post-production is that you can show off the thing already. You can say, like, look at what we shot. The thing is, for post-production, you want to create context so people understand what post-production actually means, because most people don't know what that means. Like, they think it's just editing. It's like, why do you need more money? Why do you need so much more money just for editing? And it's like, well, let me show you. Like, here's a shot of uncolored footage. Here's a shot of it colored. We need to do that for the whole film. Or, like, here's what our sound sounds like right now. It's pretty shitty. Here's what it could sound like. It would sound really great, but we need to pay someone to do all 90 minutes of that. And so, like, it's all about creating context. And you just want to be, like, transparent and open with your audience. And on our platform, you create a wish list so people can see exactly how you'll be spending the money. And so it's like, you can contextualize for them where the rest of the money will go, what else you have to shoot. Some people have shot, like, films in multiple cities or multiple countries. So it's like, hey, our film, there's a project called Neon Vacation. It's about a woman who's, like, from New York, but she goes on vacation in Greece. And so they shot everything in New York and then crowdfunded for the Greece shoot. And so it was like, that's what we need money for. Like, very clearly, we've already shot this because we live here, but now we need to raise the money to actually get to Greece and hire all these people. Yeah. And then people are, like, get very excited about potential things on your wish list. Like, on mine, I had this donkey care item to take care of the donkeys that would be on set, and, like, people were very excited about that and, like, wanting to give back. So it was very unique. It was, like, more exciting than giving to insurance. No one cared to give to the production insurance. But yeah. And so it's also, like, people don't, even in terms of production, people don't realize all the different roles that need to be filled. Like, what is a gaffer? They don't know what a gaffer is. And so, like, you can kind of create that context so they understand what they're paying for and where the money's going.
You might have said this, but is a typical campaign 30 days?
So you can choose 30, 45, or 60 days. 30 is the most common. I don't recommend doing longer unless you have very specific reason to, like if you're trying to bookend specific dates or events or something. But generally speaking, it's really hard to maintain momentum for that long. And so, like, 30 days is good because it's long enough to really get that momentum and reach strangers, but it's not so long that people are just exhausted by you. Yeah.
What's the average time span that you suggest prior to starting the campaign of all the pre-campaign?
2 months minimum. You want to really start, like, narrowing things down. You want to start shooting your pitch video and, like, collecting your emails and getting your message testing going 2 months before at minimum. For my last campaign, I think it was like 6 months that I started hyping it, and, like, I had already, I created, I started using the hashtag for the film, and I started sharing some visuals, I started talking about it, I started asking people those questions. So the sooner the better. I always say, though, that, like, 2 months is a solid enough time to say, like, okay, I've done the work, and now I'm going to go into the campaign.
And is there a time of year that's like, don't do a crowdfunding campaign in August, or is there, like, sometimes
the holidays? Don't do, yeah, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Basically, like, by the time mid-November rolls around, you don't want to be crowdfunding. Unless you're, like, I mean, I don't know, unless you're going to be targeting very specific, like, audience that doesn't care about the holidays, but, like, isn't busy with it, like, doesn't celebrate the holidays. Or I was gonna say, like, if you're crowdfunding, targeting a country that doesn't celebrate Christmas, for instance, but I feel like all the holidays exist around there, like, not just Hanukkah, but, like, like I'm Indian on my mom's side, so like Diwali is around that time of year too. So like every holiday is around the holidays, and so like you don't want to be crowdfunding that. And then the summer is not a bad time to be crowdfunding. However, know that you like will probably need to do more face-to-face networking because people are just generally more offline in the summer. I've had the most success and I've witnessed the most success in the spring and in the fall. That just tends to be when people are like most active and paying attention. Anything else? No?
Thank you so much.
No problem. As I said, you can always like shoot me an email and I'm happy to answer any questions. If you think that you'll be crowdfunding anytime soon, feel free to just start like building it on the platform. You can save it as a draft, and so you can sort of build it as you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.